Yum, yum!
Greg here from Pixel Fondue. This video is about leveraging your Kitbash library, or making a Kitbash library and then leveraging it. So if you're like me, you buy a lot of Kitbash stuff. Like I cannot resist a sale in ArtStation or flipped normals, or there's these cool libraries of like sci-fi models for just a few bucks. So I buy a lot of them. Problem is they're typically in OBJ or FBX format, so you need to get them into a format that works best with Modo or works with a good workflow in Modo, and that's the mesh preset format. So we want to create mesh presets of all these Kitbash libraries that you buy, and there's really a set of steps you need to go through each one of these to create really nice libraries. Like all of these folders are full to the brim of Kitbash assets, right? So I have to save these out as mesh presets and create thumbnails for them. And there's a set of steps you see here on your screen that you should go through for each one of these. It's not as bad as it looks. You can get through pretty fast, and I'm hoping somebody makes some scripts or some enterprising Modo developers look at this and automate some of those stuff. But let's just take a look at creating some nice clean mesh presets in Modo off of Kitbash assets and some of the issues you'll run into. So let's just look at the first step is going to be importing them. Now, when I talk about importing them, I mean literally importing them. So don't open an FBX or open an OBJ. Import that OBJ or FBX into an LXO scene. So I have just a blank standard Modo scene here that you default scene you open with. And I want to import some models in here. So I'm just going to import this OBJ here. And this one is going to be pretty typical of OBJ files where you see a bunch of assets all smashed together in one mesh item, right? They're all there. And so we need to separate these out, center them, prep them for Modo mesh or mesh presets, and I'll go through how you do that. Another situation you often run into, and again, I'm going to import here. And one of the reasons I'm importing is eventually I'm going to save a Modo master scene, an LXO, of my prepped assets. And if you just load up an FBX, you're going to do all this work, and you think you're working in a Modo file, an LXO, but you're not. You're actually working, Modo will just let you work on an FBX, open an FBX, mess around in an FBX, save an FBX, but it's going to lack all those, it's not going to be able to save all the Modo stuff we want it to. So make sure you're working in Modo here. So this guy is another example of a Kitbash asset I bought from ArtStation. I think I just bought this one today, actually. And this one's a little bit interesting where it's a ton of different, let me just isolate these here. This is just a ton of different mesh items comprising this asset. So we need to merge these together. You're also going to notice, if I unisolate this, a massive scale difference here, even an axis. These are facing X, and these are facing Z, which is maybe a little more normal. So, these vary widely in how you get them. And so let me just open up one more. Again, I'm just going to import it into this main scene here. We'll just import one more asset in here. So we can go through this, and we'll import this one right here. And so now we've got three different assets imported. Let's take a look at this. I'm just going to hide those two. Let's take a look at this one first. So now that we have everything imported into our Modo scene, you might just want to save your scene. Just save your scene. And so you won't have to go through this whole import procedure again if it crashes or you mess up, or if you want to get back to it later. Numbers 2 and 3 on our list are similar but sort of opposite, and they are dictated by the step of asset that we load, right? We need to either merge all these different item meshes together and center it, or need to unmerge and center them. So let's take a look at unmerging first. So like I said, this is just one big chunk of polygons in this one mesh item. And if you go to polygon mode and double click and it grabs all the polygons in that sort of chunk, then you know they're all connected. So double click is just like connected as you know. And sometimes you won't get that. Maybe they're divided up into 2 or 3 chunks, but that's okay. If they sort of come into these big blocks like this, we're good to go with unmerging it. So you can select your item here, right click, and select unmerge mesh. I actually made little workbench shortcuts for these right here. These two little blue circles with the plus and these two little blue circles with the minus. I just moved those over to the workbench so I don't have to keep right clicking. And I could show you how to, maybe if you don't know how to do the workbench, I could do that in another tutorial. But right now we're just going to right click to show you how to do this. So we'll right click and we will unmerge these. And so it's going to unmerge all of these polygon islands or every single disconnected mesh. So now they're unmerged, right? So now we have all these guys as different items, which is good. Now, if some of these were, for instance, were like 2 different ones, like 2 or 3 different polygon islands, you can just grab them together and then right click and merge them. And we're actually going to do that with the second set we have here. So with the second set, we've got all of these guys. It's a whole bunch of different items, right? So if I just go to item mode here, like these are all different items. Now, if you bring it into your scene later in Modo, you can always unmerge it. So for instance, I can merge this and say merge meshes. That's a tough one to say. Hit OK, and it's going to just collapse them all down into one mesh right here. Boom. But later on, if I import this into Modo and I want to like get these fan blades separate so I can animate them, I can always right click and say unmerge mesh, and it's just going to pull it all apart by polygon island again, sort of just inverting what we did. So you can always get to all of those later on. Let's give it a second here. You can do it Modo. There it is. So let's say I just wanted, all these fan blades. I would, grab these things. I would merge them into one mesh. Then probably, or get two of them, and then I'd merge all this body stuff into one, then animate the fan blades. But right now we're just going to make a mesh preset out of this. So we're going to merge everything together. And I'll do that with the second one as well. So let me hide that guy, and this guy right here again is just a whole bunch of different separate mesh items. So right click, merge meshes, and you can see like how it's nice to have these up here. I'll show you how this works. I can just click this up here and it'll do it for me. So it's nice to like put those sort of commonly used commands in the workbench. You can see all my polygon lock and unlock stuff is there as well. Okay, so now I've got a couple of different items here, but let me just turn them all on at the same time. You'll notice that again, there's vastly different sizes and facing different directions. So let's look at what else we need to do. But before we do that, let's center things. So I'm going to hide these two, and I'm just going to select one of these guys here. I'm going to go to polygon mode, and I'm going to center it. Now, like I have these, again, hooked up to shortcuts and things, but you'll find it right here on your main select menu. I believe it's in the select menu, or is it on the edit menu? It's on the edit menu. So center all. So we're just centering all those polygons. In fact, it may help you just to isolate these. We can look at these one at a time with the grid on. You can see that we're just centering these polygons, right? So center all. This one, and also Control R is going to repeat the last command. So I can do this really quickly, just Control R, Control R. But this is the type of thing I'm talking about. And if anybody wants to script this process, like center all polygon islands of selected meshes, that would be cool. Okay, so now these guys are all centered, right? So they're all on there. And I'm also going to center these two if they're not already centered. So Control R, center that. Was not quite centered, so you never know. This one, Control R, moved a little bit, was not quite centered. So now everything is centered. I'm also going to take a moment here and let me just unhide that. All right, let's go back to our list here. Next I have is check item transform. And the reason you want that is you just want these presets to be as clean as possible. You may not notice that your scale is at 10,000, which believe me, some stuff you buy online is going to have really weird transformations on them. And so that's going to throw you off when you get into your scene. You're not going to recognize it right away. Why is this so gigantic? Or why is this so small? Or why is this rotated around when I zeroed it out and now it's all like off axis? You just want to make sure all your transforms are at 0, your scale's at 100, so it's a nice, clean baseline asset. You can always go back in here and reset them all like that. These two as well, all zeroed out. Again, like I can reset them if I am worried about it. All right, I got my transforms taken care of. Now I need to check the scale. And as you notice, like the scale was a little weird on some of these items in the scene. So we want to keep things as much to sort of real world scale, at least I do, as I can. So if I have like humans in the scene, like these are a lot of sci-fi assets. I want like sci-fi crates to be crate sized. I want sci-fi paneling to be paneling sized. I don't want it to be 60 meters wide. And so this is sort of a sci-fi wall I've got right here. If I look at my dimensions, in fact, why don't I just click on go over here to display, and let's just add dimensions like that. And we can take a look at it. So about 9 meters long, 1.5 meters, about 3 meters tall or 10 feet tall. That's about right for like a sort of a wall section. So I'm like okay with that. But if I go over to some of these, like, some of this paneling stuff, this thing is absolutely monstrous. Let's go to display and we'll add dimensions here. It's like 50 meters long. It's like 150 feet long. They're really big, right? It's like this little, thing. Unless this is on the Death Star, at 9 meters diameter, it's probably too big. So let me select all of these guys that are too big. I want to make sure I'm in polygon mode and press R for scale. And once I get down to a small enough size, I'll see those larger wall elements behind them. If you press Control Alt when you hit Enter, it will do all 3 axes at once. This is actually pretty good right off the bat, like 5%. And So these look like sort of component size. Let me just move them over here in item mode so you can kind of see like, this looks like machinery that could fit, like on the floor next to this wall. So that looks about right to me. So again, let's make sure it's all zeroed out in item transforms. And the last thing I want to take a look at, I think, is just orientation. Right now my walls are along Z. Do I want them, facing Z, or do I want them along Z? I think I'm okay with keeping them along Z. If I wanted them facing Z, I would just make sure, again, that I'm in polygon mode and I do a rotation here. Basically you just want to set everything up in polygon mode and not item mode in terms of transform, scale, rotation, centering it in terms of translation. And the main takeaway here, again, is you want to do all these translations, all your scales, centering, rotations, and component mode. Polygon, point, edge doesn't really matter. Not in item mode. You don't want those transforms over here to show anything but zeros and 100% for scale. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. This one is check normals. Now, a lot of models that are modeled in a CAD program or in something like 3D Studio Max or in some other programs are going to come with a normal vertex map. What that means is the normal directions, or the flatness and smoothing, is going to be baked into the geometry. Modo doesn't typically do that. Modo can do that. It's an interesting program and sort of unique in that it can also do all that stuff with just materials, which is way more flexible, and that's how typically we do it in Modo. If we want something smooth or faceted, we just do it in the material section. We don't mess around with it in the baking that sort of normal information into geometry. But these, when you download Kitbash assets, they're probably not made it in Modo. And what you'll see when you grab one of these guys, if you go over here to the vertex map, you'll see something called surface normal. You see this in CAD programs a lot. Let me just sort of isolate this here. And so what that is doing is determining the smoothing, okay? And so if I take this, I right click and delete it like that, sometimes everything looks fine, and sometimes you'll see shading errors. And so there's a couple of ways to deal with this. If you're not going to modify the geometry, it's best just to keep I'm just undoing it. It's best just to keep the surface normal there. But sometimes if you're going to go in there and manipulate the geometry, Modo's modeling tools will often destroy those and kind of wreck your mesh. So if I just sort of grab some verts here and start moving these around, it can often mess with the shading that is baked into these vertex normals. Or if I Boolean into it or something like that. So it's really a choice you're making. I just want to bring this up because often people will say, hey, I'm getting these weird shading errors in the render or some weird black streaks or something like that. It's usually corrupted surface normals for modeling operations on geometry that has them. And you usually just delete them, okay? Next thing is mesh cleanup. So running mesh cleanup on imported geometry, especially if it's made in other programs, is usually not a bad idea. Now, I don't know if there's anything messed up with any of these, but oftentimes, if say we toggle vertices on, there'll be floating vertices and things like that that you didn't know were there. And it's often nice just to run mesh cleanup. And you can do that. It's pretty much on all of these menus at the top. Mesh cleanup right there. I think they just keep it at the top of all of these. So you run mesh cleanup, just keep everything checked, hit OK. And here it's like it deleted 8 polygons, right? Probably had 8 one-point polygons or something like that. And you can, again, Control R through all of these, right? Boom. This one took out some discontinuous values and merged a few vertices. And so there's usually something going on with these. Oftentimes you'll never see it in the render. But if you start doing some modeling operations, they may pop up. And it's just a good idea if you're going to get nice pristine Kitbash assets that you just go through here and do this. Again, if anybody wants to write a script that lets me run mesh cleanup on every selected item, that would be cool. In fact, it'd be cool just to combine all these things I'm showing you into one giant script. One might think I'm making this video as a sort of plea to get people to write the script for me so I don't have to go and do this. This particular asset has 250,000 polygons, so this mesh cleanup's taking a little bit longer here. Okay, looking good. Meshes are clean. Let's take a look at what's next. Okay, check materials, preset materials. So you're going to want to check the materials on the Kitbash assets you buy. Again, they're probably not made in Modo, and they may be imported with some weird material settings. Both FBX and OBJ often come with things like luminosity turned up, or transparency at 100%, and some weird stuff like that. You don't want to save that as a mesh preset with messed up materials. What I like to do is assign a preset material that I've made specifically for mesh presets that lets me render out nice clean thumbnails for them, and it's just a nice clean starting place for when I import these into the scene. So let's take a look at that. So I'm just going to select everything at once here. I have all these mesh items selected, and if I look over here in stats, I see polygons, and I look at the materials here. I've got 3 different material types: default, material, and none. Now you may want to keep those different material tags, those polygon tags in there, and you may want to get rid of them. That's totally up to you. It depends on the type of preset. So sometimes they come with nice, material tags set up for texturing. Other times they're just kind of random, left over from a CAD program or from the modeling process, and they don't really mean anything. Here, they don't really mean anything. So with everything selected and in polygon mode, I'm just going to press N to assign default material. It's just going to assign a default material p tag to everything. You'll see right here, they all have the default material tag. Over here in the shader tree, I've got my default material tag right here. So kind of like transforms, you want to zero out these material values. One way to do it is just to use these channel presets here. So I've made another video, I'll link in the description, where you can make these. Here I have just some base glass, base metal, base plastic. Also just the default material in Modo I've got right here as well as a preset. And I have one called mesh preset material. If I select that, what this one does is it just bumps up the diffuse to 100 and makes the diffuse color white, and this makes for a nice thumbnail. But you can do whatever you want. If these were all going to be metal, maybe I give it a base metal preset like that and save those off. So they're ready to, they're metal, they're ready to be textured as metal. Properties like, specular and Fresnel are already turned up, and diffuse is already turned to 0. If they're glass, you may want to do something like a base, glass preset or a base plastic preset, that kind of stuff. But I'm just going to do my base preset material, which is the material I like for my thumbnails. Okay, we're almost there. We're going to rename our items, and then we're going to drag them into a folder. So first I'm going to rename. So let's just grab these guys here. In fact, I'll just grab all of them. Right click, and I'll just rename sci-fi samples, and it'll add a suffix to them automatically. You can also do the rename ... and just do add numeric suffix like that. We have a separator like an underscore. Maybe you start with 1 and maximum length of 1, or a 2, hit OK. Now we've got sci-fi 01 to 14. That may be a better way to do it if you prefer that. Any rate, when we go to our Kitbash folder here, that already exists in my preset library, I'm going to create a new library or a new folder by pressing this plus button. I'll just call this samples, and then we'll just double click to go into the samples folder, which is right here. And I'm going to drag these in one at a time. Now, I swear you used to be able to just select a whole bunch and drag them in, and it would just create one mesh preset per mesh item. Now it just clumps them all together into one giant mesh preset. And I'm guessing this is from the whole preset overhaul that was done in 15. That I don't know why they did any of that stuff, or that it even works, but it doesn't work now to drag a bunch of them. So you're dragging these one at a time. So you're going boom. And again, you're going to see this little cube there. It used to automatically create a thumbnail for you. It does not do that anymore. So I don't think that's a huge loss. I mean, the thumbnails were okay. They were better than nothing. But I always thought they looked kind of bad, and I would redo them anyway. So I'm just dragging these in here one at a time. Again, seems like a great opportunity for a script person to script this whole part in as well. So like add all selected mesh items into separate presets. But here's what we got. So we've got our presets in here, but they're all a bunch of cubes. We don't want a bunch of cubes. We want really nice looking thumbnails. So a couple different things. Let's check our render size. The maximum thumbnail size I believe Modo supports is 512 by 512, so we'll set our render size to that. Let's check our lighting, and then we're going to render and replace with last image with a right mouse click. So let's go over to our render item here. Let's make sure we're at 512 by 512. I've already done that. And you can even pop open a preview window if you want to take a look like that. Let's go down. Yes, make sure not everything is visible at once. Although when you drag them to your site, when you drag the presets into your folder, you want to make sure that the eyeball is on. Otherwise, I think when you drag it back in, it'll be off by default. Anyway, I want to fill up my space here and get a decent angle on this. I've also done a similar thing with the lighting where I don't like shadows on it, so I'm turning off my directional light. Like, I don't like those shadows, I think they look bad. So I want a nice soft look, and I want nice soft lighting, sort of white lighting. So again, I'm using presets here, like panel presets. So for my environment material, I've got a number of presets like Maya, Houdini, gray, sky, all kinds of stuff. I also have one I made called Mesh Preset Gradient. It's just a sort of a white and a gray. And again, there's a link to the video that shows you how to do that below if you don't know how to do those or how to make those. But I like this. And then I'm just going to press F9 to render it. And after that pops up, if you hover over, you just want to make sure again that your sci-fi sample 01 is the same as this one right here. So you're not putting the wrong thumbnail in the wrong mesh. Right click, replace with last render. Now, sometimes that doesn't work, or it appears to not work. It actually works, but it doesn't update in the viewport here. And I found that just, even resorting it or going out to another directory and coming back in doesn't work either, and you have to restart Modo. So if you bump into that and nothing is happening, it probably worked. You're just gonna have to restart Modo, unfortunately, to see the update. But I noticed you only have to restart once and it seems to work, but I'm not sure what that bug is. And so at this point, you're just working your way through the rest of your assets here, right? Just make it visible, render it, and then you can right click and replace the thumb with the last render. So this type of workflow is definitely labor intensive, no doubt about it. It'd be nice. I think we can script a lot of this stuff. In fact, if anybody wants to take a stab at that, I will definitely show you a script on Pixel Fondue if you want to sell it or give it away or put it in GitHub. That would be cool. If not, I'm not really sure what the alternative is, because I don't think that just using the file manager is the best alternative. Here I'm just looking at this OBJ in the file manager. I know like Mac can do this as well. I think it'll show FBX, maybe even USD. But just being able to see a thumbnail or a rotating thumbnail is nice, but that doesn't mean that the geometry is ready to use, because you skipped this entire process of centering things and merging things and unmerging things and mesh cleanup and checking materials and checking orientation and checking scale. Maybe viewing assets, USD assets or something is a shortcut, but odds are there's always going to be something wrong with that when you bring it into Modo. But you're going to be doing work once you bring it in Modo, and here you're sort of doing the work beforehand. You just have to, once you buy the Kitbash on Flip Normals or ArtStation, you just got to sit down and do this real quick. It'll take 20 minutes or 30 minutes, just get through them all, and then they're available in your library. And otherwise, it's going to sit in a zip somewhere in your hard drive, and you are just going to forget you even bought it. And you know exactly what I'm talking about, because I know you have bought a bunch of these, and they're just sitting in your hard drive, and you've never even touched them. So do this process. It's worth it. Maybe pay the kid down the street $10 to do it for you. They get to learn Modo. Right. That's it.
Yum, yum.